But I get a lot of these calls. You know, I've got your dad's Sunbeam Alpine, I hear that one a lot, or I've got your dad's Porsche 911, and I happen to know where those cars really ultimately went.
I've been around a few of my father's historic race cars. I get a lot of calls, and they aren't. You know what? This car really could be the prototype.
Every day that I wake up, I like to get out there and go to work on cars. That's my life. That's what I do. Whether it's painting or creating or chopping tops. But no, I love it, and it's my life, and that's what I do. I modify cars, I build cars, I paint, and I love it. Well, Trans Am was born by styling people at the styling department of Pontiac Motor Division. You know, they work on those things, and they develop those 5, 6, 7 years in advance. So the Trans Am was already developed before I got into the picture, but the styling division called me and asked me to develop some accessories and to enhance the car a little bit, which I did, and I started doing some sketches, and then I contracted Terry Bradley, who was a well-known artist. He did the actual rendering and sketches for me, and we sent those to the studio, and they said, okay, let's go, let's do it. So then I developed the hood in full-size clay and made fiberglass parts and everything. Then I shipped those parts to Detroit and went to Pontiac Engineering, installed the parts and painted them right there. And then they had John DeLorean come down once I got it all painted. By the way, that was a silver car, and I'm pretty sure he liked silver. He came down and he picked 6 out of 7 of the parts that I had designed and developed. In my opinion, the birth of the Trans Am was when I walked in there with those parts and installed them on that prototype car right in Pontiac Engineering, and then I painted them. They furnished the paint gun and the paint, and I actually painted them silver to match. And then John DeLorean, they called him, and he came down the next day, and I was there, and he looked it over, and he was pretty surprised. He liked everything, almost everything I did. It was really great.
In the late 1960s, the golden age of auto racing was in full swing on ovals, drag strips, and road courses. One of the finest sports car drivers from that era was two-time national champion Jerry Titus, who was recruited by Pontiac for the 1969 season.
The Firebird, my father had been racing for Ford. The Firebird, John DeLorean talked to my dad, talked to Shelby, talked to a lot of people, got my father to come over. Shelby did not go with him, and decided we're going to get Pontiac up front as well. What do we need? So the first early prototypes of that stuff starts to show up. Very talented engineers did a good job at General Motors developing these cars, pretty much, you know, cloak and dagger. It was a stealth program, to be sure. Now, '69 happens, man, everyone's busting loose with these wild cars. We go to Royal Pontiac and pick up this car, a very, very early car in production, like in the first 11 and probably number 2 or 3 in that group that were built really as kind of litmus tests of the development of these cars. So now we bring this car back, we start to fix it up. I assume this is going to be one of the cars we strip to turn into a race car. As it turns out, the car has other responsibilities, and we pick up 5, maybe 6, but probably 5 standard street, bare bones, 3 on the tree, 6-cylinder Firebirds, and those are the cars we ultimately strip that we get from Royal Pontiac. Now he's driving this thing, and every once in a while, I got to take it out, which is why when Curt got it, it didn't have any more trim rings on the wheels. And the tires no longer had writing left on the sides either, because these things move around. But it became an important car in my family. First of all, I liked it parked out front. That looked pretty cool. But my dad grew to like it. And then unfortunately, after he died, my stepmother got off of her broom long enough to actually drive the car, and unfortunately traded it in on a Datsun 510. So it doesn't have the happiest of endings. Not gonna lie to you.
The car traded hands several times over the next 40 years, and its true identity was lost. Its historical importance as the sole remaining Trans Am prototype would only be rediscovered after the car was purchased by Lexington car collector Curt Richards.
My story begins in 2009. I saw this car on eBay, and I went and looked at the car. The car was in Simpsonville, Kentucky. And when I left, my curiosity just kept me interested in the car, and the power of the internet is kind of what gave me that gut feeling that, you know what, this car really could be the prototype. 1969 March Hot Rod magazine actually featured this car, and seeing these pictures and kind of just putting things together, you know, I just went on really just a gut feeling, and went and bought the car. I called the guy up, he still had the car. He said, you know, he said, that's a special car from Pontiac. You know, and I said to him, I said, you know, I said, I really think that it is too. And I said, you know, I said, I'm either paying a high water mark for a '69 Firebird, or I just bought a piece of history for 25 cents on the dollar. And he looked at me, he said, you know, it's up to you to prove.
The Trans Am story is brought to you by McGunegill Engine Performance, the power to win.
Steve Kelly, you know, is in my same thing there. I got on the internet, I just searched his name, and I found his information, called him up. He is still around, and, you know, said, hey, I'm looking at a March 1969 Hot Rod magazine that you wrote about this silver Trans Am. And in 1969, they were releasing the GTO Judge also, and Steve tells the story that he got a call from John DeLorean, and John DeLorean told him, look, Steve, we're behind on the release of this Firebird Trans Am. Will you do this story on this car? Actually, John DeLorean delivered the car to him personally at Petersen Publishing, and he had the car for 2 weeks. When John DeLorean delivers the car to him, he takes the car to Riverside. The same December press test they did with the GTO Judge, and they did with the '69 Trans Am. And there are a number of pictures that actually show the car along with Steve at the racetrack at Riverside driving the car. There were some really, really good pictures of the car and his recollection of the event. George Stevens, who was, I think he was the assistant public relations director for Pontiac, was the guy who arranged that. But Steve Kelly was very entertaining to talk to, and just connected a lot of the things about this car, because this car was manufactured in November of '68. This press test happened in December of '68. The car had to be an early '68 car in order to be done by December '68 in order to be in the magazine.
George Stevens of Pontiac not only orchestrated the prototype's media tests at Riverside, but personally oversaw the transfer of the car from Pontiac into the hands of their leading sports car driver for the 1969 season, Jerry Titus. The handwritten invoice from Stevens contained vital clues to the car's identity. The vehicle identification number matches the one on the car. The number 35 delivery designation demonstrates that this car was destined for Pontiac's engineering department, where designer Gene Winfield performed his development work. And the display instructions prove that this was a media test car, the same one used by Hot Rod, Carcraft, and others.
My dad had started this race team. We got a shop not too from our house in Encino, and the shop was in Tarzana, and looked like a big hobby shop to me. All these cool things for building cool cars, and I knew we were going to be running Firebirds now, and so we were off to go pick up the first series of those cars, not least of which was Curt's silver car at the time. And we went over there with the intent that I would drive the truck back, and my dad would drive the Firebird on home. I mean, these were pretty powerful street cars at the time, and unfortunately, as the shop door opened, we see what I believe was the left front tucked completely underneath the car. And apparently, though no one would confess to it, either the lot boy or somebody decided that they'd go out and test drive it for Jerry Titus. They really didn't need their help, but apparently they thought so. And what they test drove was the curb and apparently a fire hydrant, and tore it up pretty good. So we ended up having to go back, get a trailer to bring it back. They offered to fix it. My father goes, "No, we'll handle that." And I sensed he was pretty upset. Let's just put it that way. It had a report card day feel to it. Put it on the trailer and ran it back to our shop. And it's funny, interesting how those scars kind of became important, because when I was talking to Curt about the restoration of that car, you know, there are so many cars that pretend to be something. The way our crew fixed that was certainly not conventional body shop repair. It was far more along the lines of a racing type repair. And as Curt and I talked on the phone, those scars that were there from that proved to be very important, so I'm glad they're still there. The patchwork is just done so differently. It's not how a body shop would have stretched it back or maybe even cut a section and put a rail in. It was the way our guys actually went in and re-welded that area. The nuts that were going to be important to put the control arm back too. I instantly recognized what they did. And you have to remember that for me to watch craftsmen at this level, you know, my father was a pretty skilled fabricator. The guys that came with my dad to form this team were really, really talented guys. And I mean, these guys were aircraft level welders with TIG and all that stuff. And the quality of what looks almost like stitch work and the way things were done, and that kind of fabrication for me was just amazing to even witness. So that kind of stuff sticks to you when you're that young and you've never been exposed to it at that level before.
The Trans Am story is brought to you by McGunegill Engine Performance, the power to win.
I am so thrilled that Scott and his crew are a part of this project from the very beginning. Once I decided that, you know what, this car needs to be taken back to its glory, because it was a far cry from that. You know, when I got the car, to me there was no other choice than to pick Scott and his crew at Supercar Specialties to do this car.
When I started this business, my goal was to restore the rarest and most unique cars. But Curt's car, I mean, we all know and love Trans Ams, and here's the car that got the ball rolling. Basically, all the cars that we've done over the years, we disassemble every single component on the car, whether it's the steering column, the engine, the rear end, every single piece gets disassembled. We clean every piece carefully, we look at what plating we find, what color we find, and then we try to replicate it. You know, whether it's a plating process, a paint process, so every component of the car will be restored as close to an original look as we can achieve.
Dan, what's the guy with the transmission, Dan? I can't
Oh, Brian? Oh, it's an automatic.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the floor speed.
Yeah, he's done that. And
So that should be handled.
he just did it.
It's all the power steering bracket.
The wing was missing, and the guy, we found the original wing.
That was on this car?
Yes, we found that it was off. It was gone when I got the car.
Unbelievably, the prototype's original rear wing was found in Hickory, North Carolina. Sanding it down revealed that the wing was originally painted silver over a red primer, the exact colors of the prototype as painted by Gene Winfield in 1968.
Well, this is the body for Curt's Trans Am, the prototype car. We've been doing metal work on it since, really the middle of the winter up until, you know, current time. We've done the body work on the trunk lid, the spoiler. The spoiler had warped over the years. It was down about 1/4 of an inch in the center. So when you shut the trunk, it had a much bigger gap right here to the quarters than what we wanted. And then of course when you sighted down it was real low in the middle. So Tim was able to cut it in a few places, and we got the shape that we wanted, then re-glassed it all back together. Basically, we ended up working towards the front end. We've got this left fender, repaired the rust at the bottom, refined the gaps the way that we wanted. These are the fender extractors. They were on the vehicle and, you know, when it got here. Now, we didn't disassemble them, so all the stuff was just a part. To look at them, the way they were fabricated and things, I believe that they were the original parts to the car. They were a little bit crudely made, which you would kind of maybe expect from a prototype part. And the way the studs were in them was different than I've seen on production. So they were made out of brass. They were just a little screw kind of. They drilled a hole, countersunk them, slid the brass screws in and glued them in place and then glassed over them. Well, there was cracks and different things, so we took them all back apart and cleaned all the stuff up. Ultimately, we finished the inside nicer than they were just because I thought it looked better when you looked inside them. And so these are basically ready to sand to paint. We've got them fitted to the car real nice so that it's going to look good. The only thing we have to do yet, because these are new fenders, we have to put the holes in that allow the extractors to work. So I've got to figure out exactly the dimensions and the shape of those holes. So that's one thing we have to do yet to the fenders. But just kind of neat that it had the original extractors that Winfield had made back then.
Getting excited. Getting excited. You know, the car's actually starting to look like a car, and you know, we're making some really good progress, I think. I'm excited, you know. What's still just really truly amazes me is that whether it was my fate or fortune, but you know, there was a lot of other people that are looking for this stuff that were asleep at the wheel.
Just assembly, all the painting's done to this car. Everything's painted. It's just all assembly at this point.
I look forward to the day, and we're not that far away, that this car is finished, and I arrived back in Michigan from Kentucky, and we opened the garage door, and there it is. And this car is going to be spectacular.
The Trans Am story is brought to you by McGunegill Engine Performance, the power to win.
Oh, I know it's going to be spectacular. Scott and the crew here at Supercar just have done a fantastic job, and I couldn't be happier. Woo! Wow. You know, it hadn't looked that good since 1969, I'm sure. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I've got those. And they're like this. Yeah.
I wondered when we were making them.
Yeah. It's going to be one of the premier cars for the Muscle Car Corvette Nationals show in Chicago. And we're going to do an unveil. And I am just excited to do that because people are going to really, really enjoy this car, and it's going to really make a real fitting, I guess, end to this project. I mean, it's just going to be very special. I think it is something that, you know, cars come and go, but memories always last. And sometimes they're more important and more valuable than the machine. You know, the memories of the journeys and the trips and the drives and things that come along with any car, and so I think that's part of it.
You know, it's funny. I'd been around a few of my father's restored race cars. I get a lot of calls, and they aren't. But the cars that really are, there is an immediate emotional hit for me. You saw how hard it is for me to talk about my dad anyway. It's going to be hard. It's always a little hard. Because he's there, you know. But I'm looking forward to it because I love stuff that, you know, here's my father's been gone 44 years. And he's still talked about it all the time. That's pretty cool. I don't think people would be talking about me unless I do some kind of mass shooting in 44 years. So you gotta respect and admire the accomplishments that he pulled off.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming out here to the 2014 Muscle Car Corvette Nationals. Is everybody having some fun?
I'm just thrilled to have this piece of Pontiac history. What this is. They all came after this.
now time to have everybody take a first look at it. It's unveiled. Curt, it is your honor. I know Addie will probably give you a hand, but it's time to unveil this car.
Here we go.
All right, everybody, put your hands together. An incredible car. Jerry Titus, an icon of racing. Rick, another great industry guy.
Well, the Muscle Car and Corvette Nationals here in Chicago is the biggest show on the planet for, you know, unveilings of really special cars, as well as just everything that you see here is real. You know, it's a real show. There is nothing, if you can imagine it and they built it, then it is here.
Thousands of people had the chance to see the newly restored Trans Am prototype. One of them was James Wallace, a Holley carburetor engineer who had driven the car when it belonged to Jerry Titus.
Well, I used to go out to do calibration work. Jerry would schedule racing events at, or calibration events at Willow Springs. And this car was outside of his shop at Thousand Oaks. And I had to go run an errand for something, and he said, take that car. Well, I thought Jerry was very personable. He could talk to anybody, but he was very serious when it come to racing. But outside of the track or off on the side of the track, he was extremely friendly. He wasn't aloof. I thought he was a great guy.
It is a time machine. You know, you look through that windshield when you're sitting in that car, and it's the time machine. It takes you back. You know, it's the smells, it's the sounds, it's the noise. I don't know how you top it. You know, I really don't. I'm just part of the story, and hopefully it'll always remain in this type of condition. It'll always have my touch on it, and I'll look forward to seeing it down the road.